Hi, I'm psychologist and author Leona Deakin, and this is Leadership Journeys, where I talk to women from diverse worlds who've achieved extraordinary things to find out what enabled them to survive and to thrive. Last week, we heard from ex-England cricketer Holly Colvin, who talked about her amazing career as part of the World Cup winning England team, but that it just didn't feed her soul, and how she learned that really by following her gut, well, that was the way to true fulfilment. This week on Leadership Journeys,
everybody at some point may be experiencing something different, or maybe experiencing a degree of being a minority or being othered, and that's why you lead with kindness. I have had feedback that I communicate well. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that comfortably now, not necessarily confidently, but comfortably, is because actually I'm doing a disservice to all those people that have given me that feedback. Words are, for me, one of my superpowers.
Can kindness be the key to being a great boss? On this episode, I'm talking to Rebecca Oliver Mooney, or Rom, head of commercial for Co-op and founder of Raising the Glass, an initiative that creates meaningful connections that drive inclusivity for women and allies in the drinks industry. It's a really cool initiative. It's got a podcast, networking events, and a mentoring programme. Rom herself has over 20 years' experience in FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, with brands such as Mars, Nestle, Kellogg's and Muller, just making me hungry just reading those. She is a passionate advocate for inspiring and engaging people through great communication and the use of stories. So we have lots in common, and I was on Rom's podcast, Raising the Glass, before Christmas, and we had a blast. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I want to hear what she's learned about achieving commercial success, but also why supporting other women is so very important to her. Hiya, Rom.
Thanks for having me.
It's lovely. It's lovely to be here in your home in the middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere, yeah. Very.
Oh, I'm very jealous of this.
Yes, well, it's great when you're planning to work from home or in the holidays, but yeah, when the weather hits you and you can't get out the drive, sometimes it's not quite as convenient.
No. Right, so let's delve in. So your job for the Co-op. So the Co-op's quite a cool organisation and has a predominantly female leadership profile at the moment, doesn't it? Which is really, really interesting considering the nature of many sort of large corporate organisations. So just tell me a little bit about your role and the Co-op and what that's like to work in. Just give us a little bit of a flavour of your day-to-day.
So I work within the commercial team at the Co-op, and I look after certain categories. So I have the pleasure of looking after frozen. I look after what we term community buying. So that's where we bring together areas where we focus on buying with a community in mind. So that could be our World Foods area. It could be our local area supporting local communities. And it's our area where we look at working with our small suppliers. So we have an incubator and an accelerator scheme called the Apiary. And I also look after drinks as well, which is a fantastically exciting category to be part of. I have worked for the Co-op for about 4.5 years now. It is, as you say, quite unique sometimes because we are an ethical retailer, and that runs through all of our DNA. So for anybody that doesn't know, the cooperative movement was the pioneer movement. It was founded over 180 years ago, and the ethos of what set that movement up today still runs through our DNA. At the moment, there's a lot of people talking about whether DE&I should be rebranded to FAIR, or even more worryingly, is it time to pedal back? And I'm super proud to work for an organisation where we're not pedaling back. But more than that, we've got leadership that actually promotes the fact that we're not pedaling back. And we'll talk about that and make everybody realise how important. And look, statistically, you can see that DE&I really makes a difference to organisations and they thrive. But at the moment where there's a lot of noise about it, to have an organisation that stands up and says, we're going again, is brilliant. And I have a very unique experience because I work in an organisation where my leader is a woman, my CFO is a woman, my CEO is a woman. And you kind of stop seeing the challenge sometimes when you're surrounded by not just gender, but also leadership that centers around protected characteristics being visible. Then you sort of think everybody has that experience. And sometimes you have to fact check yourself and realize that not everybody has the privilege of working in an organization that continuously strives to deliver and make sure that we have an inclusive culture so that everyone can be their authentic selves at work.
Yeah, there's so many interesting things in there. So the acronyms you use in there, the DE&I, that's all the diversity.
The diversity, equity and inclusion.
And what was the second acronym you used with the F?
So people are talking about rebranding it to fair and centering around that, I suppose, still a degree of inclusivity, but the fairness behind it and losing actually some, I suppose, of that diversity. For me, the biggest bit that it boils down to is inclusion and inclusivity and belonging. Everybody wants to feel that they belong. And I think that when you are in the corporate world or any job, you really need to understand that the lens that you look through might not be a lens that everybody experiences. So how can you be more empathic, or how can you be more aware and therefore perhaps understand that you may need to do things differently to ensure that everybody just belongs?
Yes. And that belonging is so powerful, isn't it? On a motivational level, feeling like we have value and that people care about what we do, the impact we have, who we are. Yeah. You know, these are quite fundamental things, aren't they, of feeling connected to the world. But you're saying that the Co-op as a brand, it started out being one where it was very integrity-led, sort of values-led. So what are the values that sit within that brand then that you see living and breathing? Because organisations talk about values all the time, but they're just stuck on a piece of paper on the wall. It sounds like you experience them. Is that right?
Yeah, I have worked in a couple of really value-led organisations in my time where you do feel them. And I have worked for organisations where it is, here's some values and can you recite them and do you know what they mean? I think where I see it working really well, and the Co-op is an example of that, is people will talk about how it makes them feel. So it's not necessarily this is a behaviour that I can frame. We do have that, but it's more about the culture. And does everybody experience that culture in the same way? Now, we're all individuals, so we'll take it in different ways and we'll roll it around in our minds a bit and it will mean something different. But if you can feel that you're in a culture that everybody is having the same experience of, and that links back to the company's values, you could say Co-op was very lucky because we were founded on the values of this pioneering movement. And the fact that even today we still believe that we have a responsibility as an ethical retailer.
But you're a senior leader in this organisation. So what does that mean for you in terms of leading your people? What does that require of you as a leader that you do to make people feel that sense of the culture coming to life and belonging and being fair and ethical? What does that mean?
Some of it is, you can lean into the values and the behaviours that we talk about. Cooperation is a big thing for us. We're the Co-op, and cooperation with the supply base is important, but also cooperating with your colleagues and your team. And when you think about that element of belonging, and we've spoken about it before, it's rooted in you. You want to belong because it's linked to safety. These are the people in my tribe that I am safe with and I belong with. And I think sometimes when you work in large organisations and you have lots of different teams, you can get a brilliant sense of belonging within your team that you work with day in and day out. And then suddenly you see another team, another tribe, and sometimes their objective might be slightly different. And it's trying to boil it back down to what is the common goal that we're all trying to deliver against? What is it within those key performance indicators, those KPIs, where we can align? And I think being able to create environments where you can have conversations, you can have the right conversation the right way. And I think sometimes, certainly earlier on in my career when I was learning and growing, and I talk about accidental management often, you're doing really well in a role and you take a step up to the next level and you become almost overnight a people leader. And I think actually sometimes you grow into that confidence of how do we have the conversations in the right way? And they can be challenging conversations, are okay, done in the right way. And I think, again, anchoring back to the behaviours of things like cooperation, fairness, equity, can help you benchmark your behaviours. Autonomy is a big one for me, empowering the team. As I said, I work with the drinks category now, and I came into that 18 months ago with very limited knowledge and a team who are absolutely brilliant. And I mean really, really brilliant, particularly in some of the categories like wine, where it's very nuanced and there's a lot of qualifications. And, you know, I'm still there going, oh, is this red or white? Is it, you know, I hadn't, whilst I'd grown up with people who drank wine, I hadn't experienced necessarily a lifestyle of getting over familiar with all these amazing products. And you go through a moment of huge imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And then I got to a place of actually, I'm not here to make a decision on which wine we're going to blend. If any of my team are listening, they'll be delightfully relieved that I realised that very quickly. I'm here to add value in different ways. But again, I'm a little bit more comfortable in my skin now to say I might not know everything about that, but the team are brilliant, and let me get them to answer the question or share their thoughts with you, as opposed to having all the answers to all the questions, which I think probably earlier on in my career, my imposter syndrome showed up in a way that made me feel like I had to know everything about everything.
Yes, I think it's really common, isn't it, that particularly when people are new into management and leadership, that you feel like you're being paid to know. You're being paid to solve the problems and make the decisions. That's your role. And so we can fall into the trap of continuing to be the doer.
Yes.
Whereas actually what you're saying there is the thing that, well, there's a few things going on there, isn't there? One, you're reframing your role. So not having to have all the answers, not having to know all the intricacies of the wine, but actually being the facilitator of other people's performance and other people's expertise. And then the ways that you're doing that, one, obviously creating that sense of belonging, but also empowering and giving autonomy to people so that they can presumably choose their own way of doing things.
Yes.
Within an agreed kind of
within some
parameters.
guardrails. Yes.
Yeah, of what where we're trying to get to.
What's the end in mind? And a lot of the time somebody else's way will be different and often much better than the way I would have done it. And again, for me, that links back to the diversity point. And I suppose thought diversity. If we're all going the same way from a kind of an instruction down of this is the way we're going to do it, we're going to lose something somewhere along the way. We're going to miss an opportunity. We might take a bit longer to do something or do it in a way that maybe costs more to the business. So I think that empowerment is really, really important for individuals. I do think people perform better when they feel trusted and valued and empowered, as long as they've got a framework to feel supported. But I think it's often better for businesses. And I think that bit between the doing element, spoiler alert, the doing never goes, but your doing changes. And I talk a lot to my team of leaders around, leading versus doing and creating a framework, because everybody needs to grow and develop into that bit. And the more you dip into the doing, you're taking learning opportunities away. So the analogy I use is tying shoelaces. So for anybody who has children, this may well resonate, but when you have a young child and a toddler and they're learning to tie their shoelaces, getting out of the house is a nightmare. You don't get anywhere on time, because if that child is adamant they're trying to learn to tie their shoelaces, there's no negotiating with them. So you can put them in Velcro shoes for a little bit longer, and you can tie them themselves and get them out of the door. But every time you do that, you take away the opportunity for them to learn to tie their own shoes, and you just prolong the learning experience. So I'm a huge fan of giving people space and the safety network to learn to tie their own shoes and learn and grow and evolve in their roles.
I love that. When and how did you learn this, do you think, when you look back in your career? So you said you came into management, there was a bit of imposter syndrome, you were thinking it was one thing, and then at some point the penny dropped, or what went on there? Were there some experiences?
It's all experience-based. Some of the major learnings in my, I was going to say in my career, but in my life have come at the crux of almost sometimes things being taken out of your control, so you experience in a different way.
Okay.
I think for me, there are times where you work in a certain way. You're doing the doing, you're taking more stuff, you're doing the doing, you're doing the doing, you're churning things out. And it could be that you realize that maybe somebody who's been a high performer suddenly isn't performing as well. And that could be your impact on them, because you've kind of come in and you've overmanaged and you've micromanaged. I talk a lot about don't let great get in the way of good. And sometimes good is good enough. And those moments of learning normally come when you're kind of in a real moment of crunch and something might have to fall off. And that presentation that you spent ages titivating around the edge, do you know what? It's good enough. And then you realize that actually it was good enough. And it's not saying that you're lowering your standards. It's just actually you're moving your capacity of work elsewhere.
Yes.
Trust is a huge thing for me. I learned throughout my career. For some people, trust just exists. Psychological safety just exists until it doesn't. For others, you have to see that it's there. It almost has to be built up for you. I've struggled a lot with psychological safety.
Okay. Tell us a bit about that then. So what are your insights into that? What's been your challenge?
I have been in rooms where I have felt there hasn't been psychological safety.
Okay.
And again, as I've grown in my career and I've become a bit more confident and I've been confident enough to talk about it, and I've said, I'm not too sure psychological safety exists here. And the voice around the room will be, it does. Of course it's safe. I'm thinking, it doesn't. How can these people just feel that it exists?
And what did you feel was missing? What was your concern when you look back? Like, you must have been feeling a bit of anxiety there about speaking up, speaking out, those kinds of things, were you?
Absolutely. I think, and again, I think I've grown in my career to be more comfortable about speaking up and speaking out. So that's part of it. But I think the moment of crystallization for me was these two schools of thought of psychological safety exists until it doesn't, or you build it and it exists, that there's a third school of thought, which is for some people, psychological safety at work may never exist, particularly when you consider protected characteristics. And I was having a conversation recently on the Raising the Glass podcast about for some people of colour, psychological safety will never exist in the work environment. And it made me realise that actually maybe my approach to psychological safety is that it does need to be proven for me to believe it exists because of the protected characteristics that I walk into a room with. And I think one of my biggest reflections is meeting people where they are and just being aware. And it's not enough to say psychological safety exists, or it's not enough to say we will build it. You have to feel it.
Yes.
And everybody's different and everybody takes things in differently. So the only person who can truly tell you whether they've got psychological safety is an individual. Now, you can be a bit brave in that space. You can go, I think it exists. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to speak out. But I think if you are an individual who sat in a room going, of course, psychological safety exists, please don't say that. That's not the comment we need you to say. We need you to speak up and speak out and show us that it exists in the way you behave and the way you help, therefore create that space for others.
Yeah, so it's a bit of that, there is no reality, there's only perceptions of reality.
Absolutely.
And so if I'm saying, hey, this team is psychologically safe, that's because I feel psychologically safe. So I suppose the point you're making is that doesn't mean everybody else does as well.
Yes, but me coming into that team may go, I don't know anybody in this team, or my viewpoint is different. And that's fine because we're trying to drive thought diversity, but nobody else has socialized this idea yet.
Yes.
And why not? And maybe I shouldn't. And then we're way back slammed into imposter syndrome, or as we like to try to rebrand it, improver syndrome.
Improver syndrome. I remember you talking to me about that on the last time we spoke in your podcast. And I really like that kind of flipping of it. I think anything where we have the power to reframe something is incredibly powerful, and understanding that mindset change can affect so much. It can affect how you feel about yourself. It can affect your actions, all of those things, can't it? But this whole thing about that psychological safety, it's just making me think, as well as those protected characteristics, like you were saying, there are some categories of people who might struggle to feel psychologically safe just in general. And it was making me think, but from a psychological point of view, there will be some people who, for their own reasons, their self-esteem is damaged and very low. Their ability to trust has been kind of weathered away. And so they are more vulnerable as a character. And so even though the circumstances around them might be really supportive and caring, doesn't necessarily, it's not a cause and effect. They've got a longer journey. And I suppose that's the point you're making, isn't it? To not assume that we're all the same.
Yeah. You never, ever know what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You just don't. And we talked earlier about some of the fantastic leadership I get to experience at Co-op. But Shireen, our CEO, recently came out and talked about how we're not dialing back on DE&I. And she referenced the fact that everybody will experience being a minority at some point, which is quite a statement because we don't often feel that. But it could be gender, it could be ethnicity, it could be lower socioeconomic background, it could be age. And then you have that aha moment. Mm-hmm. All of us at some point, if we're lucky, will experience being a minority of old age.
Yes.
So we all potentially in our lifetime will experience that. So therefore you can say, you don't know what's going on in anybody's life at all, but everybody at some point may be experiencing something different or maybe experiencing a degree of being a minority or being othered. And that's why you lead with kindness.
Yes,
not
which I was going to come on
assumptions.
to that. Because, but it's very powerful to have your most senior leader actually explicitly talking about diversity and respecting diversity and the fact we all are diverse.
Yes.
That's, I imagine, sets a tone within the organisation. But that whole thing about leading with kindness. So if we get to that behavioural level, because I know you're a really passionate communicator and you like stories and you feel that's really important within your leadership impact to communicate and communicate well. And then there's the kindness thing as well. So tell us a little bit about the more tactical side of how you lead and the things you've found over the years help you to get the best out of the people that you're responsible for.
I think the reason why I love stories so much is because when you use the word story, everybody gets a little smile on their face and they go back to a place of remembering somebody telling them a story. And it's stories have the power to connect us. Stories have been part of our communication toolkit from the moment we could communicate. We sat around fires and told stories. And again, those stories were stories of fantastic achievements of hunting beasts and of succeeding, or stories of don't go near the monsters, the people who are different to us. Our communication is in our DNA. And therefore, that coupled with the emotive connections that you can get, I am a really firm believer of storytelling as a form of communication, because we buy into that. Because if you're storytelling rather than presenting, you're connecting emotions and feelings. And language is more than just the words that are coming out of your mouth. It's our body language, it's our tonality. It's how you leave people feeling. And to be clear, I'm not saying that I start every meeting with people with a once upon a time. There was a girl called Ron. You can storytell in short moments and you'll be able to think of the people who you go, they're really powerful communicators. They have everybody hanging on their, what's the next sentence that's going to come out of the mouth? What's the punchline that we all know you're getting to, but we're following the cadence of the story. Throughout my career, and it's taken me a long time to say this. So if you'd asked me this probably even 5 years ago, I would have gone, I don't know. But I have had feedback that I communicate well. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that comfortably now, not necessarily confidently, but comfortably, is because actually I'm doing a disservice to all those people that have given me that feedback and said, can you help me? Or how do you do it? Because if I go, I'm not really very good, then that discredits everybody else's feelings. So I hear the feedback and I reflect on it. And I am lucky that it's one of one of my skills. I often say words are my numbers. Spoiler alert, numbers are also my numbers. But words are my numbers. Words are, for me, one of my superpowers.
Yes. So why do you think it makes you feel uncomfortable to say, I'm a good communicator?
Because probably there's some point in my childhood where I stood up to present at school and I fumbled over a word and I can remember somebody picking on it. And therefore, I can't say that 100% of the time I've been a brilliant communicator.
Okay.
That's my, the little 6-7-year-old Rom will sometimes still rear her head.
So that's that perfectionistic kind of approach, isn't it? That if I haven't done it perfectly right every single time, then I can't claim that particular talent, as it were.
and I think certainly for me as an individual, I do not think I'm alone in this statement. If I put my head above the parapet, back to that psychological safety, what if somebody says, well, I don't like your communication style, or no, you're not. So we almost sort of quench our own superpower down to protect it so that nobody can kind of throw a few things in over the side and go, actually, that's not you at your best. Because then that really, when somebody challenges a super belief of your superpower, that's really hard to come back from, because that can shift all of the foundations that you've built.
So there's a risk to showing off your superpowers in that somebody might lob a tomato at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something like communication's a really interesting one as well, because I have had a career where I've been in the privileged position to do lots of presentations to sometimes big groups of people, and you get the adrenaline and you get the nerves and you present and you come off and everyone goes, oh, that's great. You were really good. You must really love it. No. And then because you can perform in the space and it's not necessarily communication. For other people, it will be different things. Sometimes when you are in that space where you're just brilliantly great at something, you don't often get the feedback for it because people feel it comes easy to you. I find public speaking terrifying. There's a reason why glossophobia exists, the fear of public speaking. And actually more people are scared of that than they are of spiders and dying. So that goes to show how scary public speaking is. We're baring our soul, right? Mm-hmm. We're really opening ourselves up. So no wonder it's a terrifying experience. So I think that even when people are great at things, tell them that you think they're great at something.
Yes.
Because sometimes that's where we don't hear it enough.
Absolutely. My younger sister is a trainer for hearing dogs for the deaf. And I remember her saying to me once, it's really easy to train a dog or any intelligent animal, really. You just reward the behaviour you want more of and ignore the behaviour you want less of. And I thought, that is the opposite of what happens in organisations. So as an employee in an organisation, you're constantly being told, well, these are your areas for development. These are the things we want you to aspire to doing tomorrow. These are the things that you're not doing in the way we want you to do them. But that whole superpower where you handle yourself well in a meeting or you stand up and present really well, that's stuff that we take for granted because it looks like, well, you can already do it, so I don't need to tell you.
Yeah.
However, what I'm hearing from you is that even when you can do something and communicate well, you're still experiencing the anxiety and the fear of getting up in front of those people and telling that story, even though you've prepared it, even though you know that they're going to enjoy it, even though you know you'll probably execute it well, you still feel that fear. And I think if we could be more, I suppose, open with our reinforcement of others. So when we see someone do something really well, to say, hey, that's what you did really well in that moment. And not just, what did you say about, that was great, you were brilliant, you must really enjoy it, which is nice to hear, but is kind of an empty piece of feedback, isn't it?
Oh, that must have been really easy for you.
Yeah. Whereas actually what you want to know is, oh my gosh, the way you made that point there, the way you landed that evidence, the preparation that must have gone in to making that point linked to that point, that was really smart. That was really clever. I'm going to remember that. So sometimes I think it's the richness of feedback, isn't it, that we really need. And even if we look really confident and competent, doesn't mean we feel it.
it's back to that sense of belonging. Feedback can really help you feel like you belong. Mm-hmm. And I think often, you're right, you get told, here are all your development areas. Now, let's just take a moment to acknowledge that 15 years ago, we were calling them weaknesses. So we've come a long way on that journey. Now there are development areas. Go and work on them. And everybody has development areas. That's okay. I still haven't met somebody who's absolutely brilliant at every single thing because we're human. But I also absolutely subscribe to the school of thought of it is definitely easier for you as an individual if you can do more of the stuff that you're great at. And that will probably have a bigger impact. Mm-hmm. So in my career, as I've kind of grown up through it, I have got comfortable with going, that is going to take a lot of energy for me to move into that space. Oh, there's somebody over there who is just brilliant at it. I talk about superpowers. Superpowers for me, that there's a couple of ways to identify them, and I use both of them. One is when somebody says to you, how did you do that? And you go, what do you mean? That's just really easy. The bit you're missing off the end of that sentence is, it's really easy for you. So if people are telling you you're doing something brilliant and you think it's really easy to do, that's your superpower. Mm-hmm. That's the bit that you can just do and own and help other people get better at by leading by example. The other bit I do is ask people what's missing when I'm not in the room. So what I'm not asking for is tell me the 3 things you think I'm good at and I should continue doing. Tell me the 3 things you think I should stop doing or start doing. What I'm saying is, what's missing when I'm not in the room? Because what I get through that question is, here's something that you are good at. Tick, that's nice for me. But also, and I really value it. Mm-hmm. Because if it's not in the room, it's been missed. And therefore you start to identify again what your superpowers are, but where they really show up and can influence.
So have you done that for yourself, like asking people that question?
Yes.
Yes. And that has helped you to really understand the impact that your presence has.
It's helped me understand the impact that my presence has. It's helped me understand the impact that when I'm not operating within my guardrails, I can have that bit. You know, sometimes you spend some time with somebody and it jars slightly. You can't quite put your finger on it. They're probably flexing way, way above their flex points. But it's also helped me define my purpose. And that I've probably worked on my purpose throughout my career. You go to a course, go away, and it's always very fluffy. And rather embarrassingly earlier, I said words are my words. And it took me a long time to get to the words of my purpose, who I am.
And what is that then?
So my purpose is that I create safe spaces so people can be bravely curious and curiously brave, because that's where their magic happens.
Lovely. I felt like that needed just a moment. So, and what's striking me about this, Rom, is that as well as asking for that kind of feedback for yourself and learning about yourself as you've gone and been brave and courageous yourself, which all gives us that ability to understand what other people might be going through. I'm imagining this must take a lot of empathy and attention as a leader if you are working out who might not feel psychologically safe, or who might need that little bit of extra feedback to identify their superpower, or who might need a little bit of a push out of their comfort zone to be brave and improve. So you're having to pay attention, presumably a lot, to your people.
I think everybody who works with somebody should. Mm-hmm. And I think not just as a leader, we spend in the corporate world a lot of time looking up and down. You know, am I doing enough on my leadership journey to get to where I aspire to be? And you know, who am I looking up that might be where I see myself in the future? But actually, some of the biggest things that we should be doing is looking to our left and our right. Are our peers okay? Can we check in on them? Are our teams okay? You know, my job is to make sure my team are okay. Mm. And you're right. And I pay attention and I strive to be an accessible and open person that people can build relationships with me. Point to note, all of my relationships with my team will differ from person to person. And again, that was probably a learning in my career. One size doesn't fit all because we are all human beings.
Yes, it's fairness, not equality, isn't it? And I think once you get your head around the fact that I'm not going to treat everybody the same, which would be equality. So I am a leader who will spend every Monday morning talking to you about what you've got coming up and helping you think about how you're going to do it. And you're all going to get that as a team of 10. But then understanding that actually, no, you're very experienced or you're very independent minded or you're very comfortable in this space and you don't want your manager hanging around chatting to you every Monday morning about what you just go away and I'll call you if I need you. Whereas someone else might be like, oh my goodness, yeah, this is really helping. Please sit with me. Please help me think it through. That's fair.
Yes, I think it's a deeper level than that. Is the personality. Some people are like, I just want to talk about everything and share. And some people
Yes.
are like, yeah, but you're here to work today, so let's just talk about this. And showing up and we talk a lot about authenticity and over flexing, but flexing's a really powerful tool. Authenticity doesn't mean you show up and go, this is me. This is how I'm going to be. We do a lot of work on ourselves. And again, I've had the privilege in my career to do a lot of personality assessments and a lot of personality. And I love anything that can help me understand myself a bit better. But what I always say is they all come with a big red alert button, because what you can't do is say, for anybody that's done coloured insights, I'm red blue, so treat me like I'm red blue and nothing. We have to go, but we work in a team that's got lots of yellow people. So how do we bring those in? Or lots of green. If you've done Myers-Briggs, but particularly in the corporate world, introversion and extroversion, we work in industries where you see extroversion and they're built around extroversion. What does that mean? It means we've got some really powerful, highly functioning introverts. So again, how do we flex your style? But the bit around the fairness or the equity, but I think it's more how you're working with people for me is situational leadership. So your example of, on Monday morning, I'm going to brief everybody in exactly the same way and talk through it in this way, doesn't work for everybody. But it also doesn't work for the same person all of the time.
Yes.
So when you're doing stuff that you're absolutely brilliant at, that you do really well, you don't want somebody going, just talk me through exactly what you're doing, back to that micromanagement bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when someone goes, it's normally positioned as, I've got a great opportunity for you. That moment of, oh no, I've never done this before. This is a big, big hill that I'm going to have to climb. That's when you do want the support of people around you and your manager. Just help me get comfortable with it. And I think when people understand that situational leadership never goes away, it's not the individual, it's what's happening to them at that time that dictates how you need to show up as a leader in that position.
Yes, and it's understanding that people's behaviour is as much about where they are as who they are, or when they are as who they are.
Absolutely.
And so at some points they'll feel very confident and at other points they might feel very vulnerable. Same personality.
And I think that's probably one of the things that I sort of wish I'd stumbled across situational leadership earlier on in my career.
Yeah.
But that understanding of sometimes an individual in my team needs me on the pitch with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're happy to have me at the sidelines, and sometimes I can sit up in the bleachers and just cheer away. That bit of, again, going back to that accidental management, and normally our initial management style is built on, I've had a manager that's done all this amazing stuff and I want to do the same, and a combination of, and these bits really didn't work. I absolutely don't want to do that. That is how we start learning to lead. But the more we can do around just understanding things like situational leadership, the things that make us all individual and how we respond to
personality
that.
differences. As you say, I think from a leader's point of view, one of the most powerful things about a personality profile is not what it tells you about yourself, because these are self-reported tools. So it's basically holding up a mirror.
Yeah.
So you might get a bit of refinement around the edge, but you should recognise yourself in that profile. Yeah. I think what's really powerful about it is realising how different someone else can be. That, for every extrovert, out and out, chatty, gets their energy from other people, loves talking things through, externalizes everything, is quite excitable. There's a quiet, reflective individual who might look shy, but actually doesn't want you there because they're deep within their own thoughts and very content. Thank you very much. But possibly having the best ideas in the room
Yes.
but nobody's inviting them to speak. I think this is where understanding that, going back to that diversity and understanding people, paying attention to people. But I think what I'm hearing from you is on your journey, you've learned about yourself and understood not only your impact, but your character and your preferences and your superpowers. And that has helped you to then empathize, understand, appreciate the people who are different and what might make them tick. And that's the thing that you're honing over your career, isn't it?
Yeah. The bit I never look at, I mean, you do a psychological assessment, you go, oh no, I can't be that one. I want to be that shiny one over there. And again, I'm pretty sure it's human nature to read something about yourself and go, that's the boring profile, isn't it? It might just be the ones I get. But I read them now with a lens of how can I flex? So if I am introverted, I can't sit in meetings all the time and say, I'm not going to talk until somebody asks me to talk. So what are my coping techniques that allow me to flex? And actually, I talk introversion, extroversion quite a lot because for two reasons. When you say to somebody extrovert and introvert, you described it wonderfully well. You talked about where you get your energy from. But most people go to a traditional, larger than life extrovert, shy introvert. That isn't what it is in this example. It is exactly where do you get your energy from? So as a off the scale introvert, believe it or not, because people normally go, no, you're not. I go, I am. And also this bit of paper says I am. I know that I can function in the corporate world, which is quite extroverted, in occasions, some of which I've put myself in, where I've set up things and gone, this is actually something where somebody who gets a lot of energy from being an extrovert would probably thrive in. I can still function, but I know what my coping techniques need to be. So if I am doing a big presentation, a big networking event, I know that I'm going to be exhausted after it. And I just want to sit with myself and my thoughts for a little bit to recharge. Yeah. So if that's what works for me, my EQ has helped me understand that other people will have coping techniques for whatever their psychological assessments tell about them, or however they are and however they show up.
What drains their energy. So we all have those activities that lift our energy and those things that drain it, don't we? And so understanding those kinds of things, But it's that, I think we talked about last time, Susan Cain's book, Quiet, which is, in general, I mean, I'm really paraphrasing hugely here, but to me, what it says is extroverts run the world and introverts should. So it's just like the introverts are paying so much more attention and thinking so much more deeply. But I think what's really strong about what you're saying there is if you are a leader and you have people in your team who are more introverted, more reflective, more quiet, more considered, then you have a responsibility to bring them in and draw them out, or give them the time to just decompress after they've had to do something that's extrovert in behaviour. However, you're also talking about you individually as an introvert have a responsibility to still step into that extroverted activity and be present, particularly as a leader. Yeah. And push yourself out of your comfort zone in order to have the impact you want, get the things done, serve your purpose.
But I think I've learned how to push myself, I suppose, out of my comfort zone, yes, but to do it in a way that's still authentic to me. So I think with leadership, we sometimes don't understand the power of the responsibility it brings. So let's be really, really open about this. Much like school teachers, I think, you can always remember a brilliant boss. You can always remember somebody who wasn't brilliant. And I think as leaders, we need to remember the shadow we cast, the impact you can have on an individual wider than work. That time when you sit at home in the evening worrying about something and what somebody might say can be as a result of somebody that isn't leading you in the right way, versus the comfort of this bit of work's just come in and I'm not too sure how to do it, but do you know what? I've got somebody who will really support me. So you have to understand being a leader is a real privilege. People are putting trust in you and people are putting their feelings in you. Mm-hmm. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. I think there is also probably an element of vulnerability. And I think just showing up in that example of introversion versus extroversion, I probably did spend my career showing up as an extrovert. This is how everybody else is acting. So back to equity, belonging. I need to act the same, particularly as a woman in the corporate world, where I probably flexed even more in away from some of my warm leadership skills into other leadership skills that other people were displaying and almost being rewarded for with promotions and acceleration and things like that.
Right.
So I've got to a place in my career where I am now comfortable. When people used to go, "You're not an introvert, you're an extrovert," I was like, yes, I've fooled you again. I almost wore it as a badge of pride that you didn't know. And I've done a lot to try to be very open about, you know what, I am an introvert and I have coping techniques. So what are the coping techniques that I can share? You said, how do you bring people in? How do you bring people in a way that's right for them, which isn't always about in the moment? Mm-hmm. How do we create space for the reflectors? Mm-hmm. How do we warm up a room? You know, I am always talking to the team about there are people who will naturally warm up a room. And it's just, again, probably their superpower and they don't realise that they're doing it, versus some people who go, "Oh, there's going to be 3 or 4 people and I'm going to have to make that uncomfortable small talk for a bit and tell the same joke that I've told for the last 3 meetings." Yeah, how do we bring people in a way that's comfortable? And as I said before, how do we meet people where they are?
Yes, you're making me think of, I remember years ago working with a fellow psychologist, and we'd do these training events, full day training events, and we'd just do an introductory kind of coffee in the morning and then we'd start. And she would not only know everybody's name, but she'd know how many children they had, where they lived, where they'd been on holiday and what their hobbies were. And I used to just look at her like she was an alien, thinking how, but that was her superpower. She was so incredibly warm and she would walk around the room genuinely fascinated by these people. And then that would just breed this lovely atmosphere. Lovely, warm atmosphere. So, yeah, like you say, some people have just got that, haven't they?
And it's great that you talk about that positively, because sometimes some people will go, I look at that and go, I should be able to do that. I remember relatively early in my career, I was in probably managerial positions, and I was working with a woman who was doing the same role as me, and brilliant, great leader, great manager. And her superpower was her ability to retain data like I'd never seen before.
Right.
And somebody could ask a data stat and you should be able to go, well, 3 weeks ago, we saw this rate of sale, or we sold this, or whatever. She could just recall this data. And I used to really get in my head about it. I used to kind of go, how do I get this retained in my brain? And it's not my superpower. So I can remember a lot of statistics and a lot of storytelling statistics, but 3 weeks ago in this store on a product, what did we sell? I'm probably going to have to go and look somewhere for it. But the more I reflected on it, the more I tried to do it, the more I couldn't do it, the more effort it took, the more energy it took, the more frustrated I got when I couldn't remember it. And I remember being very vulnerable with my manager at the time and going, wish I was more like this person. And they said, if I asked you that question, would you know where to go to get the answer? I went, yeah. They went, well, then why are you trying to hold it in your head? And that is something that has stuck with me. As long as I know where to go to get the answer, I don't need to carry it in my head. Now, again, that's vulnerability, because sometimes you'll get the question. And again, whether it's your imposter syndrome or whether it's the leadership or whatever it is, when a big boss asks you the question, it's really brave to go, I don't know, but I'll come back to you, because you start going, well, what's the repercussions? And do you operate in a safe environment where you can do that? And I'm lucky that I do, because I bring a whole load of other things into the conversation that might not be that specific data point. But if that's what you want to know, I'll get you the answer. But actually, your question behind the question might mean that I can tell you this, 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 and this. Thought diversity. The question you're asking me right now might not be the conversation that we're actually going to have, which might get us to a broader answer or a different answer.
Yeah, and that's that whole, you're talking about one of the elements of imposter syndrome is comparing ourselves to other people too much, and in particular comparing ourselves to all the good things other people can do. So
Yes.
like you're saying there, you've got the stato of your world who can just list off statistics like that, which is amazing. And then we go, well, I want to do that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to get better at something, is there? However, there is also power in saying, well, that's your superpower. That's something that you're good at. And probably because that lifts that woman's energy and is something that she's always enjoyed doing and probably serves her purpose. And your energy comes from somewhere else. And your purpose is more about creating these environments that make people feel brave and courageous. And so you don't need stats for that. What you need is to pay attention to the people, be kind, build a feeling of belonging, understand yourself, understand other people's emotions, all the things you've been talking about all the way through. That's the stuff that fires you up, isn't it? That's the stuff that feeds your soul. That's why you're good at that. And then we come back, well, that's the magic of diversity.
Because if you speak to the person who I'm going, wow, you can hold all this information, 9 times out of 10, they're looking at you going, I wish I could tell that story. I've got all these data stats. I wish I could put them into a story.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's that growth mindset idea that we all are capable of improvement, and we absolutely are. However, it doesn't mean we have to improve on everything. I think that's the bit sometimes people miss, because it's all about interest and passion, isn't it? It's going to take you a long time to rewire your brain. So you have to really want to rewire your brain. Yeah. It has to mean something to you, doesn't it?
You have to care.
You have to care about it. So as a kind of final thing, so I don't want to finish without talking about the raising the glass.
Yes.
Does that fit with this kind of identifying your own purpose? Is that an initiative that helped you form that clarity, or has it come out of that clarity? Is it linked?
It is linked and also very muddled. So for anybody who doesn't know, Raising the Glass is a not-for-profit organisation that exists to create meaningful connections for women and allies in the drinks industry. And it is fundamentally based on some of my experiences as I came into the drinks industry. So I in my career, have worked in different organisations and different categories, different product groups, confectionery, pet food, dairy, protein, some very similar ones and some very different ones. But my experience of moving into the drinks industry was a little bit of imposter syndrome, which we've spoken about, huge excitement. Who doesn't want to be involved in this category? And some moments of, ooh, it's 2024. Did I just catch that comment right? Is that data stat right? Are over 70% of women thinking about leaving the drinks industry because they're worried about safety linking perhaps to sexual harassment, for example, if you are working in potentially the hospitality industry? It is not a safe industry for everybody. And so Raising the Glass was set up on the belief that everybody should feel seen, valued, heard, and that opportunities are abundant for everyone in their career, and that everybody should feel safe.
And so how is Raising the Glass doing that? What are you creating?
We're creating a community. And I think if you'd asked me before it was up and running, how is it going to do it? What is it going to do? The answer would have been very different. It would have been quite functional. It would have been, we've got networking events, we've got a podcast, we've got mentoring. All of those are really important. We get people in the room with the networking and we create opportunities for people to connect. The podcast for those introverted people who don't want to sit in a room allows you to listen to some great connections. I am super, super proud of the mentoring program. So we set that up recently, and that is creating mentoring opportunities and mentee opportunities within the drinks industry. Because again, psychological safety, you might want to talk about experiences and you might want to talk about it with somebody who isn't in your organisation, or you might want to broaden your network. But now that the community is helping grow and evolve what Raising the Glass is. So the vision will never change. It is about creating those connections in a meaningful way. How we do it might shift. How we communicate might shift. But the biggest bit for me, going back to the question of, was it, I suppose, coming out of learnings and things, is I have got more comfortable with myself as I've got older.
Yes, and that comes over. Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about, you kind of get to an age and you do just, and we're struggling to crystallize what it is, but there's a little bit of the Greg Wallace example, where he said it was certain women of a certain age criticising his behaviour. Well, of course it was. Because in my 40s, I'm probably in a more comfortable position with my friendship groups, with my family, financially, from a work point of view, that I probably will put my head above the parapet. Mm. And I'm just a little bit more comfortable in myself. What's the worst that can happen is more dealable with for me now. Stuff that I experienced in my 20s, even in my 30s, if I experienced it now, I would deal with it very differently.
Yeah.
Because I back myself a little bit more. My support network is fantastic and backs me a little bit more. So that's given me the confidence. And as I say, Raising the Glass was set up off a few of my personal experiences within the span of about 6 weeks working in the drinks industry. And a little bit of checking in with the cheerleaders. What do you think? This is what I'm feeling. And then people who had either worked in the industry for ages or people who were the people that I just looked at and went, you're absolutely brilliant, were going, this is a brilliant idea. Mm-hmm. Then you go, right, there's something in it. So you set up an initiative like that, you turn up to the first networking event, you cross your fingers and hope that there's more than 3 people in the audience. And there were, and there have been ever since. And we have sold out events and we have great podcasting streams. And then it comes full circle because now I've got a voice. Madeleine Albright was right. Now I've found my voice. I'm not going to silence it, not just because it's my voice, but because I do feel a responsibility, which I'm so grateful for, to be the voice of people who haven't found their voice yet.
Yeah.
And that's not just a Raising the Glass, women in drinks, women in leadership. That's a woman with a non-visible disability. That's neurodiversity. I have the privilege of being a voice for my children. Mm-hmm. Whilst they grow into their voices. And actually, my daughter had some things going on at school and was called into a meeting. And she said, will you come to the meeting? I said, of course I will. It was relating to some education stuff with her exams. I heard her talking to her sister saying, well, I'm quite excited about the meeting, but my mum will be in the room as well and she'll help if I don't know what to say or can't find my voice. And I thought, your EQ is going to be pretty strong when you grow up into a 40-year-old woman because it's pretty awesome now.
Yeah.
So I think my leadership journey has absolutely crystallized itself with being comfortable to use my voice to help the voices of others. And why wouldn't it be when my superpower is storytelling?
Yes. And it seems like you said you have learned about yourself over the years and that's been your journey. However, what I'm hearing is something similar but subtly different. I think you've learned to believe in yourself.
Yes.
And that's what the difference is. So now you believe that you have the right to use your voice. You believe you have something worthy and valuable to say. You believe in you and the things that you stand for. And
it's really easy to say, just believe in yourself. You know, for anybody listening thinking they're going to get a brilliant nugget of information, my nugget of information is not believe in yourself because that's really hard to do. Surround yourself by people who believe in you. And then you start to believe in yourself. And those people who truly believe in you, your cheerleaders, those people who have got your back, they're not going to tell you you're right all the time. They're not going to tell you you're the best all the time. You don't want
that though, do you? They are not helping your journey. You want the people who are going to go...
Just sense check that.
Sense check that. What would you tell, just to kind of summarise that, if you could go back and whisper in your younger ear when you were kind of in your teens, early 20s and kind of starting out in your career, what would you whisper in your own ear to help the journey?
What I would whisper in my own ear would be, just hold on, the world's going to change. What I would whisper in the ear of somebody today, you know, teens looking into careers, it is actually probably that the world will change and you will change. Don't rush for perfection because that growth mindset, you'll probably never achieve it. If you do, tell me how you got there. As I say, don't let great get in the way of good, and good is good enough. Mm-hmm. But the best bit of advice I would give to my younger self is to be kind. Be kind to those around you. Be kind to everybody. And please never forget to be kind to yourself.
Absolutely. Probably the most important one, isn't it?
And the
Being
one that
kind to yourself.
often is lower down the list.
It is.
That analogy of put your own oxygen on yourself
Yes.
so that you can help others. Anybody who has heard that has probably gone, well, no, I'm going to put on that person, that person first and that person. And we would all put an oxygen mask on our children, our loved ones, our friends, our family. But you still have to create space, because if there is nothing left in your bucket, nothing left, you can't be there for others. And I guarantee to anyone listening, you are so inspirational and so valued by so many people that you have a responsibility to keep your bucket full so you can continue to support and help them.
Yes. So turning up your own inner cheerleader and dialing down your own inner critic.
Yeah.
And just realising that you are having a positive impact. You are valuable and you do belong.
And you are good enough.
I love it, Rom. Wow, that's been absolutely great. What's so lovely, I think, is listening to a leader in such a fast-moving environment at such a senior level, talking about things like kindness and belonging and facilitating the empowerment and autonomy of others. I think that is incredibly inspiring. So thank you so much. I have no doubt the listeners to Leadership Journeys will have found that really inspiring. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. You're like a big sister sometimes to me. So this has been very, very easy to record. So thank you.
Coming up next time.
I was working for one business and the environment was very toxic. I was miserable and I thought that I could overcome it and just keep going. I did a great job. I was still moving my way up in my career. I thought I have to do something different. One of the worst points when an ambulance had to be called because I couldn't breathe at work. It was anxiety. It was a panic attack. And so I thought, right, this has to change. I really, really want to make sure that whatever I do, it's helping other people. I could see a lot of other people going through the same thing.